The changing face of the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the nation just a short while ago. And now for more. It's a pleasure to welcome to studio Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and the former IDF International Spokesperson for the IDF, Aditya Rajkaul, Executive Editor at National and Security Affairs at NDTV, and our Senior Correspondent, Owen Alterman. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here. What a speech. What a speech. It's exactly 1 week in since this joint Israeli-US coordinated operation. Jonathan, your take on the successes so far? Certainly a very confident, rousing speech from the Prime Minister. He sounds like there's a long way to go, but he's certainly very upbeat. Your thoughts?
Yeah, first and foremost, credit to Owen for translating. That's a tough job doing simultaneous or almost simultaneous interpretation. But more to the point here, I think the Israeli Prime Minister is totally right to be in the position that he is in. And I think the messages are correct in the sense of leading the way forward. Key takeaways beyond, the obvious success and the credit that must be given to the US. I think it's important that he emphasized that Israel is committed to the territorial integrity of Iran and that Israel isn't seeking to balkanize the country. That is one of the main fears that many Iranians outside of Iran and many regime opposition figures inside Iran fear, that it'll be balkanized to different states based on ethnic backgrounds. And the fact that he says that clearly addresses that point, and that's very important going forward, because the Iranian regime will try to ride on that message that if you support Israel and the US, you may bring about a balkanization of our dear homeland. And Iranians, rightfully so, are proud, and they do not want that to happen. So that's an important point. Looking forward, I think calibrating expectations, how long this will take, rightfully careful not to say weeks and days and months, probably because he isn't the person who will make that decision. That'll be made in Washington or in Florida, and Israel will have to agree to it. But I think smart moves and smart statements. And with regards to Lebanon, Hezbollah made the mistake that we wanted them to do. And now what Israel is going to do is, on one hand, apply lots of military pressure on Hezbollah, but also give the Lebanese state a helping hand. Behind closed doors and indirectly, Israel will coordinate with the Lebanese. Outwardly, for the Israeli public to see, it'll be a very stern face and very strong messaging, echoed by Defense Minister, but now also said by the Prime Minister. So a lot to be hopeful about. Positive, good speeches. One could only have wanted questions to be asked and answered by a properly accredited journalist. That would have been a nice ending. But of course, we've gone accustomed to not having questions these days.
I've got a question for you then, and that is the ability of Israel to handle Iranian threats. Ballistic missiles are still being launched towards civilian areas, as we experienced just at the top of this hour. Hezbollah still able to launch rockets and drones, and murmurings that the Houthis are looking to maybe get back in the mix, so to speak. Israel's ability to handle all these threats. So far, it's 1 week in, and as you said, this could go on for a very long time.
So far, I would carefully say that I believe the Israeli Air Force more than capable of continuing to strike and hunt missile launchers in Iran, to continue to intercept ballistic missiles fired from Iran to Israel, to continue to have a 99% success rate in intercepting incoming drones, mostly by the Iron Dome system, which is unprecedented and really room for a lot of celebration, and continuing to strike Hezbollah. The main important thing that I think we should be mindful of are the stockpiles of weapons that Israel will need. So far, I think yesterday we got reports that the US Congress has approved legislation for additional emergency weapons to be provided to Israel, including some of the high-quality GPS-guided kits that Israel needs. So currently, I believe yes, and if I take stock of our capabilities versus Hezbollah capabilities, they will run, Hezbollah in Iran, it appears as if they will run out of things to fire at us before we run out of things to defend ourselves with or fire at them.
Aditya, your thoughts on exactly that. You are a reporter from India visiting here, covering Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. And of course, you end up getting stuck here. And now you are also covering the developments right now, including going to the shelter yourself many times. I'm curious for your sense of how Israelis are handling 1 week into this war. It's been intense. There's a lot going on. From your perspective, what stands out?
Well, Benita, it has been very, very intense. I've reported from Iraq to, Israel, everything in the last 10 years to 15 years. But this has been especially a worrying trend because this is looking at an endless war. I interviewed the foreign minister just a couple of days ago here and the foreign policy advisor of Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, and they seem to suggest that it will take time. Donald Trump is, of course, giving a timeline of 4 to 5 weeks. I don't think so. I think it will take time, but this is also a battle of attrition in many ways because whichever side is out of the weapon system, particularly the missiles, is on the losing end. In this particular case, it does seem like Iran does not have that much type of a stockpile that they're referring to. We had the foreign minister and others stating that the missiles that are being used today are from 2012 and 2014, but there's no authentication or transparency at that level. So I think we are also heading towards a humanitarian crisis in many ways. So it's better that there is a ceasefire at a certain point of time. And of course, there is a democratic transition that takes place in Iran and a democratic leader takes place. But the biggest question here is that who will be that substitute democratic leader? Because there is Reza Pahlavi, but he's not down on ground. Does he have the kind of support to be elected out there and people protecting him? I don't think so. So there has to be a substitute leader within the Iranian regime, probably who rebels out, or probably a Gandhian Iranian, as Lapid mentioned recently, who comes out and says that he will be ready to lead. But at this particular time, I do see a situation very, very abnormal. Of course, US President Donald Trump has just spoken and said that the only option right now is surrender. From India point of view, I think Israel is a very strategic partner. And I think India-Israel ties have transformed in a very, very interesting way, a paradigm shift of sorts in the last decade or so. Iran and India have also been historical partners in many ways. But there are questions about the kind of methods that the Iranian regime has adopted over the last 10 years. And especially the Indian audience has been also, understanding how the Iranians have particularly gone against the Jewish community. And they want to wipe out the Jewish community, and which is certainly not as per the international rules-based order and democracy. So I believe from a journalistic point of view, it has been very, very intense. I've been observing people out here, and very interesting how common Jewish population here, common Israelis, are just not bothered in the sense that it's a part of their daily life, running to the shelter every time there's a siren. And thanks to the technology, I think the Israelis have a very robust mechanism of technology which gives them an alert very timely, and things are averted. But who knows that the civilians may become a casualty. There are already more than 13 people who have died out here, more than 1,000 injured. But the best would be, as India says, that eventually there has to be negotiation, there has to be talks, a ceasefire, and perhaps a negotiated settlement.
We know that India gave the green light for an Iranian warship to dock a few days ago. Talk to us about the balance that India plays in essentially keeping friendly or warm ties with so many countries, and in a situation like this, difficult to keep that dynamic going, isn't it?
Well, certainly it is difficult, especially at a time of war when there are two sides that are very aggressive in their posturing militarily and diplomatically. I think India has done so traditionally and historically. From the very old decades since India's independence, India has maintained a non-aligned policy. And that has continued with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the last 12 years, ever since he came to power. And as of now, what India really means is that this is not an era of war. Solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. And there should be a negotiated settlement. Diplomacy and dialogue is the way forward, certainly. So at this particular stage, of course, many of my Israeli friends may not agree with me entirely, and I respect that entirely. From your perspective, when you are under attack, obviously you will respond. And, we had something similar last year, where India and Israel stand together is countering terrorism. Now, the definition of terrorism and the perspective of terrorism could be different for different countries. For instance, India was suffering Pakistan-sponsored terrorism for the last 4 decades. And last year, we had a very dastardly Pahalgam terror attack in Kashmir Valley, where from I come, and 26 innocent civilians were killed. So India launched Operation Sindoor against the Pakistanis, and the air command control centers, the air bases were decimated, along with 9 terror launch pads all across. So we understand when it comes to terrorism, there cannot be good terror, bad terror definition. And as Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, has said repeatedly that India stands with Israel strategically against terrorism and when it comes to safeguarding your territorial integrity and sovereignty. And then finally, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was here recently. I was here covering that. And immediately after that, when the first attacks happened, I briefly interviewed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And the first words that he had to say was that I thank my friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for the kind of support that India has given to Israel. Because if you see history in the last 2 to 3 decades, the kind of support that India has given to Israel or Israel has given to India has been not seen before, especially when it comes to the battlefields, especially when it comes to defense, intelligence, and strategic affairs.
When it comes, though, to Iran, it is the head of the snake, and Israelis have known all too well the impact of all its proxies, and death to America, death to Israel is something that we are still processing after so much evil being faced over 40 years now. Jonathan Conricus, your thoughts to the solution being offered here by Aditya?
Yeah, I mean, diplomacy, we know that things will start with diplomacy, there'll be military action in the middle, and then they will eventually end with diplomatic efforts. And reality is eventually cemented by the deals that are signed on paper, usually in meeting rooms, and based on the achievements achieved on the battlefield. Contrary to what my esteemed colleague believes, I believe that we are very far from that situation now. We are very far from even speaking about or thinking about a ceasefire. Now is the time to, as Secretary of War Hegseth said, beat them while they're down. They are now down. They have been up for 30 or almost 40 years. They've been attacking us with proxies, with missiles, with suicide bombers, with terrorists, and they've been trying to destroy us. Now we have finally been able to find the leadership and courage and military activity and opportunity to strike back. That is what we're doing. I wouldn't want us to seek a ceasefire before we reach our goals. The goals, I think, simply put, should be the significant weakening of the regime in Iran, so that once we stop bombing, they simply do not have the ability to hurt Israel anymore, not with sending money to proxies, not with firing ballistic missiles, and not by trying to build nuclear weapons. Then we shall discuss the future.
It might make sense if the Iranian regime were targeting only American bases in all these Gulf nations, but to buy airport, hotels, it's just not making sense. Your reaction?
So coming back to what Pezeshkian said was quite interesting. He made 2 statements, 2 video statements. One was in front of people, the other one was a video statement, where he said, we kind of apologize for it, we didn't mean it, and it's because we don't really control the commanders of our units, and they're basically firing at will, and some of them are not in touch with the chain of command, and that is the reason that they fired. So he was trying to explain that terrible mistake in Iranian decision-making by saying we don't control our forces. That is very worrying. Like, for a country to be at war and for the president, almost head of state, to admit we are not in control of our fighting units, that is a very worrying thing. Second thing, immediately after he spoke, there were 2 statements by key figures, Speaker of the Parliament and another representative of the National Security Council, who basically negated what he said and said, well, actually, if we will continue to sustain fire from American assets that are deployed in the region, we will continue to engage those countries from where the fire is conducted from. So we can see that there is a bit of a loss of control at the military and tactical level, but also politically speaking, as the previous speaker alluded to. Doesn't bode well for the Iranians. I think Pezeshkian and perhaps people around him understand that this has been a terrible mistake of the Iranians. They thought, I think, it's basically pre-October 7 mindset where they thought that they could continue to bully the region, continue to bully Arab countries, bully Israel, bully the US, and have their way without having any consequences for it. Now they're finding out that actually it flipped on them, it backfired, and he's trying to backtrack. Not sure that he really is in power. So those two statements, very revealing. And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Very revealing indeed. Aditya Rajkaul, Senior Executive Editor at the National and Security Affairs Desk at NDTV. Your thoughts on exactly that? We only have 2 minutes until the break. Your take?
Well, on this, I completely agree with my friend, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. What I could say is that there's a leadership crisis that is emerging in Iran after Supreme Leader has been killed. We have President Pezeshkian and the foreign minister, but I don't think they have the kind of support that the Iranians are really looking forward to right now. Secondly, there are different kind of statements that are coming in that I want to point out. First, President Pezeshkian came in and he apologized to the neighboring countries in the Middle East and said that our intention was not to attack you, but the US bases, logistical centers, and the US embassies. And then, just minutes after, we had statements coming in from Iran saying that, yes, we have been attacking, but we have been attacking only the Americans, so we will not stop. Pezeshkian said that we will be stopping the attacks. And then there came a U-turn minutes later saying that, no, the attacks will continue. And now we have horrible visuals now coming in from Dubai, from other parts of the Middle East where attacks have happened. In fact, in the most popular Dubai marina, there's been an attack on the Marina Tower in which some people are injured. And of course, one Pakistani has been killed in Al Bashira area. So I believe that this leadership crisis will continue. And as US President Donald Trump has said that the ultimate solution seems to be surrender. How will the surrender really pan out would be something very interesting to see. But currently, I don't see this kind of a war ending into a ceasefire, which I believe should happen. But I don't think ceasefire is practically happening. I believe that the war will continue. It will take some time to end it. But ultimately, there has to be a democratic restoration in Iran.